Hi, welcome to JETT Radio. I'm Ted Shar, your host. Today we have Dr. Mike Roizen from the Cleveland Clinic with us to help us understand his perspective on how wellness impacts community sustainability. He is the Chief Wellness Officer at the Cleveland Clinic. Dr. Roizen, welcome. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Thanks very much for having me.
Excellent. I'm so glad that you're joining us, and I'm looking forward to learning from your perspective as well today. Hey, could you introduce us to yourself and your work?
Sure. My name is Mike Roizen. Rhymes with poison, but I'm really not. I'm a physician, and I'm the Chief Wellness Officer and Chair of the Wellness Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. And I'm both a board-certified internist and anesthesiologist, and developed the Real Age concept about 20 years ago, which says and tells you, it's scientifically based and independently validated now, the factors that, and there are 157 of them, that make you younger or older than your chronologic age. That is, your real age can be many years younger or older depending on your habits. So, for example, the worst diet in the world can make you 27 years older than your calendar age. The best diet about 13 years younger. The equivalent, if you will, in physical activity is about a 9-year effect. And so there are many other things that have lesser effects or few that have greater effects. But you get to control your rate of aging to a large degree between the ages of 50 and 100.
Yeah, where does the standard American diet fit into that aging process?
Well, as I said, the standard American diet, if you from the best diet to the worst diet, is about a 27-year effect. Stress is the only thing that has a greater effect. That is, unmanaged stress has a greater effect than that, but that's about the only thing.
Gotcha. Would we have the worst diet as Americans?
Worse diet than anybody in the rest of the world, no. We've exported our bad habits pretty effectively. So if you look at the diet that is in Asia now, whereas the peasant diet in China was pretty healthy, the middle-class diet in China, which, believe it or not, because there are more people in the middle class there than total in America, the middle class there has adopted a really bad diet. And so the Chinese and the Russians have figured out ways to have worse diets than we do and are aging faster than us because they've picked up some of our bad habits.
Gotcha. So help us understand the high-carb, low-fat craze and how that's related to diet-driven disease.
Yeah, so there are 5 foods that we call felons. These are what you might call snake oil foods. They're foods that are potentially, if we eliminated these 5 things from our diet, everything else would be healthy. So it is added sugar, added syrups, simple carbs, which is stripped carbs, stripped of their fiber and bran or vitamins. They are foods with saturated fat, and it isn't necessarily the saturated fat, but it is the carnitine, lecithin, and choline that comes with it. and trans fat. Now, trans fat will be banned, assuming no change in the law occurs, in April of 2018, the way they are already in Canada and in much of Europe. But trans fat is what preserves a lot of the, if you will, gives a lot of food a long-lasting effect, because not even bacteria or bugs will attack it because they know it's poison and they can smell it's poison. But we humans got addicted to it in our food and food chain. So those 5 foods. Now, you specifically said in around the 1960s, there was a theory that is actually very valuable and viable and correct, that foods that raise your blood cholesterol or your blood triglycerides, that is your lipids, cause or promote heart disease, stroke, and aging of your arteries. And they also promote impaired immune system, which means they increase your risk of cancer and brain dysfunction. Now, the reason I'm saying is that's a very viable theory, because the foods that raise your triglycerides are simple sugars. So we thought it was, at that time, that it was just saturated fat. Saturated fat comes with another problem, which we'll get into in a second, but saturated fat raises your lipids a little bit, but not very much. And the studies were done that were randomly controlled actually resulted in the suicide death of 2 of the leading proponents. They substituted margarine, which was largely trans fat, for saturated fat, and found worse outcomes. Well, those 2, the lead 2 investigators, which were in Alameda County, actually jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge together when they saw the results. And because they had substituted trans fat. So trans fat is worse than saturated fat, and the substitution then for saturated fat became simple sugars and carbohydrates and processed food. The problem was that sugar is a greater cause of arterial aging than is even the things that come with saturated fat. So we got into this habit of saying it's low fat, but not saying it's low simple sugar. And so we raised our blood sugar. And raising your blood sugar, it's a complex process, but when you raise your blood sugar, what you really do is change the proteins and the function. So hemoglobin A1C, which is what we measure for type 2 diabetes, is really just the hemoglobin proteins with a sugar stuck at the A1C position, which causes it to not function well. What do I mean by that, not functioning well? Well, it weakens the protein or the function. So hemoglobin, whose job it is to release oxygen, doesn't release the oxygen as well to the tissues, which in diabetics we think causes some of the ulceration and dysfunction of kidney and other organs associated with diabetes. Well, that sugar does it with a lot of proteins, and when the sugar goes up, it stays bound to that hemoglobin or that protein for the length of life of the protein. In the case of hemoglobin, 180 days. So it's bound for a very long time and causes one bad dose of too high sugar causes a lot of dysfunction, because it's the peak sugar levels that matter. Now, it turns out the worst of these proteins that it gets on, or a protein where it causes the worst problem, is the grout protein that's in between cells lining your arteries. So your artery is essentially a set of tiles that are held together by a protein that I call grout. It's like grout, and it holds the tile cells together. Well, when that protein weakens, blood pressure comes down and can cause a tear. But you've evolved over the lifetime of animals, if you will, to make sure blood stays in your system. So you have an immediate repair process which patches on, just like you might patch the grout on your home. Well, the grout in your bathroom, the grout in your arteries, is in fact LDL cholesterol. So you patch it with cholesterol. Over time, that gets inflamed, and that's what causes atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries or plaque. So sugar, simple sugars that raise your blood sugar, or added syrups. Honey, for example, is an added syrup, as is maple syrup, as is high fructose corn syrup. Those raise your blood sugar. So does simple carbohydrates, such as the processed white bread.
Yeah. So how much of healthcare costs are related to diet-driven disease? If you could put a percent on it, what would you say?
Well, we know that five things really cause 84% of all cost. And that's 2013 data. It's published by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention 2014. But 84% is caused by five things: tobacco and toxins, which is the largest cause, food choices and portion size, physical inactivity, unmanaged stress, and not doing routine prevention. That is, not getting your blood pressure under control, not getting your immunizations, etc. So those five things are associated, and we can measure them all. Obviously, you can measure your blood sugar, you can measure waist size, you can measure cholesterol levels, you can measure cotinine, the tobacco end product in the urine. So you can measure, and you can measure stress levels. So those things that are totally controllable. The estimate is that both the inflow and outflow, so we have a new book coming out called Age Proof, Living Longer Without Running Out of Money or Breaking a Hip. The reason we combine both money and health is they're so intimately related, but they also are very intimately related in what causes problems and what cures them. So inflow, outflow, inflow of dollars in income and outflow in spending, well, it's similar to inflow of calories and outflow in physical activity. But basically, the combination of those two, and believe it or not, stress plays a major role in our desire to eat and our inability to lose weight. So you really have to put the three together. But those three together are probably around 25% of our total health care costs, maybe as much as 40%. But tobacco is still a good 20% of our health care costs, too.
Yeah. So, theoretically...
Tobacco and other toxins. I shouldn't put tobacco alone.
Yeah, so theoretically, not necessarily practically, but theoretically, we could save 84% of our healthcare costs because those are all preventable. Is that correct?
Yeah, the actual data is, if you look at the Medicare database, and you say at age 65, if everyone were doing the five things in a healthy fashion, not an ideal fashion, but a healthy fashion, we reduced the people who do that have 50% lower lifetime medical costs. Now, it's actually, there's about a 70% or 75% reduction, but they live a third longer. So when you cancel out the extra costs for living longer, Social Security, et cetera, they have less disability, so less disability payments, et cetera. But when you look at the whole balance, it's about, we save 50% of our medical costs for the Medicare population for those who come into Medicare with five normals.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, so appreciate your perspective. We're coming up on our first break here and look forward to continuing this conversation in a couple of minutes. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Roizen.
My privilege.
Dr. Roizen is the Chief Wellness Officer for the Cleveland Clinic, and we'll be back to discuss how these issues affect community sustainability. Thanks for joining us today.
Credit cards are like grandkids. They love you, sometimes get out of control, and it's fun to get a new one. Who can stop them from piling on?
Hi, I'm Tom Coates with Consumer Credit of Des Moines. At the end of the day, you can return the grandkids, but you're stuck paying off bad credit card debt. We'll help you put the fun back into using credit cards responsibly. Right, kids?
Yeah!
If you need help getting credit cards off your back, call Consumer Credit of Des Moines.
Hi, my name is David Burrier, your Hope Coach. I host a live weekly talk show called I've Been There every Thursday afternoon at 5:30, right here on webcast1live.com, and on my weekly radio program Saturday mornings at 10 on Truth Network 99.3 FM. I interview common everyday people who have survived incredible life challenges and who testify to God's faithfulness in the midst of their storms. So join me as we bring a message of hope and encouragement. Everybody needs hope. I know, because I've been there.
Hey everybody, I brought Northern Lights Pizza! And it's got Graziano sausage!
Rockton Prevention is celebrating 25 years of creating a caring community. We want to say thank you to the tens of thousands of Rock High School mentors that have carried our message of health, love, and encouragement to over 1.5 million children, teachers, and parents. Our mentors teach children methods and skills to prevent bullying and drug use. Thank you to all the school administrators, teachers, and counselors for the opportunity to serve you. Rock on, fair citizens, rock on! This is Pat McManus for Rock and Prevention, the Richard O. Jacobson Foundation, and this station.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live. From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Jet Radio. I'm Ted Schauer, your host, and Dr. Mike Roizen is with us today. He is the Chief Wellness Officer for the Cleveland Clinic. Dr. Roizen, welcome back.
It's good to be back. Thank you.
Hey, I have been interested in the environment since I was in elementary school. When I went to college, I actually majored in ecology because I wanted to be a park ranger at that time. And you know, I've stayed, perhaps the one theme to my life has been an interest in sustainability. And when I started hearing some of these stats, that, such as some of the ones that you're sharing with us, it just astounded me that really wellness and healthcare can have a bigger impact on community sustainability and ultimately environmental sustainability than just about anything else. But I was wondering if you could share with us your perspective on, say we did realize a significant portion of that cost savings from prevention, what could that do for the community?
Well, if you look at our current budget deficit, the federal government's, the Boehner, John Boehner, who was the House leader, and President Obama tried to save over a 10-year period $1.2 billion. So roughly 1.2 trillion, roughly 120 billion a year. The Medicare and Medicaid budgets are now in the federal health care budgets. If you look at all the federal health care spending, it's a little over 1.3 trillion. So if you saved 50% of that, which is about what we think you could save by 70% of people doing the 5 behaviors we've talked about, you have $600 billion a year, which takes us out of deficit and allows us to spend money on infrastructure, allows us to spend money on the social programs we care about, allows us to rebuild the defense without increasing the deficit from where it is now. And so it would allow us, basically, medical expenses, the increased medical expenses that we're going to assume in the next 10 years if we don't stop this, will create a crisis that is worse than inequality. So why are medical expenses so unequal? Because most companies, and in fact even the federal government, pays fixed amounts, so that the lower income worker has to pay the same amount of copay in dollars as the higher income worker, which for the lower income worker is a much greater percentage of their total income. And that's why, and that's true for the health insurance costs as well as the copays and deductibles. So that more than 100% of income inequality growth since 1997 has been caused by medical expenses and medical insurance expenses. So the fact is, what you do is you get a much more viable society. You don't have as the growth in income inequality. In fact, it's the reverse. If you get people to do healthy behaviors, and you get that both on an individual corporate level, so the corporation can do that as well as Medicare and Medicare. But if you did that from a societal standpoint for the whole of Des Moines or the whole of the state of Iowa, you would do away with all of the income inequality growth since 1998 and could reverse it. Now, let me give you the scary part of this, though. If you don't do this, what happens is that and this is really scary, we would have to double our tax rates from what they are now to have the same deficit as we have now without any increased spending on any other thing. That is, we are having such a great influx in type 2 diabetes, in osteoarthritis, in heart disease, stroke, in post-cancer and cancer care, and in mental dysfunction, that we are rapidly increasing and will increase our deficit. So Obama was right that we had to control healthcare costs if we're going to be a viable society. The problem with the ACA, PPA, with the Accountable Care Act, or what's called Obamacare now, is very little of the instruments for Medicare or Medicaid or other insurance processes other than corporate were put in place to encourage prevention, so that what we will have is a deteriorating, if you will, if we don't change it, a deteriorating income equality level and a deteriorating, I don't know how to say it any other way, deteriorating society.
Yeah. Hey, so you're experiencing success when you help patients with preventative health care.
Well, all I can do is just tell you the Cleveland Clinic has this year, the people who participate in our plan, 95% of those who were healthy in 2009 have stayed with 5 normals. 63.8% of those, we have a big population, 49,000 employees, 52,000 dependents, are on the way or have gotten healthy. And in fact, insurance rates this year went down. Our total cost of care for those 101,000 people, despite the increase in pharmaceutical costs, despite other things, actually went down this year 2.2%.
That's outstanding.
And the group that has stayed healthy is paying 2009 rates. The group that is getting healthy or has gotten healthy is paying discounts off of current rates, and those who have gotten healthy have hit their goals, which is about 36% of the people who had a chronic disease. I'm sorry, it's about 50% of those who had a chronic disease, 36% of the total population are now getting 2009 insurance rates.
That's excellent. What questions do you ask?
We've done this with a couple other corporations, too. So Lafarge Wholesome is now saving 50% of their, roughly 48% of their total medical costs have been reduced by the same process.
Yeah. What kind of questions do you ask your patients that result in successful prevention?
I think that, in other words, what you're saying is how do you motivate people to choose healthier behaviors?
Exactly.
And there, if you will, it is clear that, and I'm going to say this in a little bit strange way, but it is clear that fear doesn't work for very long. That is, if you've had a heart attack, you might change your behavior for a little period of time, but not very long. So you say, well, how long do you change your behavior from? It ends up, if you're a guy under the age of 57, it's about 2 weeks from a heart attack. So fear does not work very well. What does work is incentives that are both incentives that are both large enough and appropriate enough work. And the other thing that works well is joy, or motivating people through an emotion where they get fun out of things. So the reason Real Age works so well to change behavior, that is knowing that you can get younger and actually getting younger and seeing the changes, is because it was fun to get younger, or it is fun to get younger. So, in fact, those are the things that when you look at it, what did we do at the Cleveland Clinic? Well, we made it a culture change where it was just like cigarette smoking is now only done by, if you will, the 15% of the cigarette smokers. They're really outcasts in society. It's not that you want them to be outcasts, but they get hooked at a young age by big tobacco, or by someone who's misleading them, and that, if you will, causes tobacco cessation, so tobacco use. And what you then have to do, since it's so addicting, is have to work hard to get them to be healthy once they get addicted through usually not a fault of their own. But the point is that you've got to change the morals so that it is looked at as a cultural benefit to be healthy, just like it is. If America gets healthy, and if our corporations get healthy, we have a competitive advantage in productivity. And that's what you really want to have from a competing for jobs with the rest of the world, et cetera. So when you look at will Des Moines, will the rest of Iowa, will the United States get healthy, it's a matter of if we don't get healthy and some other country does, we lose a competitive advantage. If we get healthy, we gain one, and we gain also income equality. We increase everybody's rate of quality of life, and we can defend ourselves. We can have money for infrastructure. We can have money for defense, and we can have money for social programs we care about.
Yeah. So a person's whole life gets better when they get healthier. Is that correct?
Well, it of course depends on how you use it, but basically it gives you the energy to do whatever you want. That's right.
Gotcha. So if I was one of your patients and I was coming into recovering after having a heart bypass surgery, what would you tell me? How would you coach me?
Well, there are a lot of things we'd like you to do. So I don't want to say it's easy and automatic, but we try and get you enrolled in a program that teaches you stress management, that gradually increases your physical activity, that makes your diet much more plant-based. It helps you learn what we call relationship foods. You want to love the food you eat, but you want it to love you back. So you shouldn't be eating any food that you can't have a relationship with. It's just like you want a relationship with your spouse, that is, they help you and you help them, and it's a positive, you protect each other's back. Well, that's the same way with food should be. The food, you shouldn't love the food and then it kill you. You should, or give you disability or sap your energy. You should have food. So we teach people love you foods and avoiding those 5 snake oil foods, the simple sugars, added syrups, stripped carbs, saturated fats, and trans fats. So we want you to avoid those 5 foods, but at the same time, there's no reason you can't have food that tastes every bit as good as any of your favorite foods, but also loves you back. So we teach them that, and we teach stress management, physical activity gradually. If they're hooked on tobacco or have a hookah habit or a smoking marijuana habit, we try and get them off of those onto things, doing habits that are healthier for them.
Yeah. Do you think that people, what percent chance of success would you give to people trying to recover on their own versus with a health coach or a doctor?
I'm going to go and just do with tobacco. If you try and go cold turkey, it's a 2 to 5% success rate. If you go with a pill or a patch, it gets up to 5%. If you go pill and patch, it gets up to 10%. Pill patch and healthy habit like walking and a buddy, it gets up to 30%. So you really dramatically increase when you have a buddy and when you have some help with you and you substitute another habit. With heart attack, you can pull the plaque out of your artery. And that's one of the joys of a healthy diet is you actually, the data are pretty good now that you can reverse about 98% of people with coronary artery disease can pull plaque out of their artery. Only about 2% are genetically condemned to put more plaque down. So you can use diet to do that, and so we teach a lot of that.
That's outstanding. So would you say that behavior change on the individual level is a combination of sort of a wellness team at the individual level plus environmental influencers, the food environment, et cetera? How would you put all that together?
Well, in fact, you're right. So one of the things that gives you automatic changes. So in Age Proof, what we talked about is how do you get the behavior change to be automatic and emotionally fun, as well as you never having regrets about it. And the automatic, so when you, for example, at the Cleveland Clinic, when we switched 401ks from being you had to check off the box to you have to uncheck off the box, the number of people who contributed to retirement plans went from 27% to 93%. So that is the automatic of getting to do the right thing is incredibly powerful. Same as when we banned smoking on campus. We've gone from about a 15.4% tobacco use rate to now 5.2%. So you can get incredibly powerful things by making those environmental changes. And the question is, how do we do it we've done it for tobacco, and we've banned sugar drinks on campus. We've taken fryers out of campus, so decreasing the trans fat greatly. How do we get the rest of it done? And you're right, it is both behavior modification and environmental change that makes it automatic.
Right. Hey, we're up to our next break here. Again, it's Dr. Mike Roizen, the Chief Wellness Officer for the Cleveland Clinic, has joined us today, and he's helping us to understand how wellness impacts community sustainability. Thanks for joining us today.
Northern Lights Pizza's amazing garlic butter makes amazing breadsticks. Now available in 12-ounce bottles at Northern Lights, Hy-Vee, and Graziano's.
Northern Lights Pizza.
I'm Brian Leach, owner of Service Legends, and my position is Chief Talent Officer.
I'm Nicholas Wonderscheid.
I am Bernie Hobbs.
And I'm the Service Manager.
Marketing Director and Client Relations Manager.
Everything that we do is about ensuring that we exceed your expectations.
Our clients are important to us. 100% satisfaction.
We're not just focused on heating and cooling. That's the easiest part of our job, actually, is fixing furnaces and air conditioners.
Everyone that we come in touch with, we want to improve lives.
Bottom line is, we've got our installation guarantees, 25% energy savings guarantee, comfort guarantee, temperature selection guarantee, property protection guarantee.
100% satisfaction guaranteed, fixed rate or it's free.
All of those guarantees are backed up with a 100% money-back guarantee to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that you get what you're after.
Just fixing the problem today. If they have another problem 5 days down the road, it's still fixed rate or it's free.
We use what's called straightforward pricing. Our technicians are going to give you an exact to-the-penny price on what it's going to take before they move forward with any repair. That way you know what to expect.
It's the same price every day.
No surprises.
If you get off work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, you come home, you realize that, oh, my furnace is broken. Now you need to call somebody out that night. You shouldn't have to pay more for that.
We're guaranteeing service 24/7.
We run afternoons, evenings, nights, weekends. We're staffed to work that.
Phone rings at 3 in the morning. You'll get one of our representatives answering the phone every time.
We're not sending you out to Timbuktu in some call center. It's our Service Legend team members, our mission control team.
I'll take a call anytime.
And then they answer the phones the same way during the day as they do at night.
It's a great day at your service company. How can we make you smile?
That's the only way to provide true 24-hour service.
When you're able to let somebody actually live in their home safely when they weren't able to do that before, where they don't have to stay up at night and worry about, is the heat going to come back on? Are we going to freeze the pipes? Is the baby in the room next door going to be sick because they got too cold? When you're able to help somebody overcome challenges like that, that's impacting a life. That makes a difference. I get goosebumps thinking about it.
I love the team. I love the people that I work with.
We have fun, but we work hard.
I call them my ambassadors of legendary service. If you could just envision what that is, that's who we're sending to your home.
They literally will call in, pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I want to talk to your manager. And I get on the phone, they're like, that technician that was at my house was the greatest technician ever. That's cool to me.
We want to brighten people's days.
Every person that we have going into the house has gone through an extensive background check.
Drug testing, we have a very thorough interview process that 1 out of 140 people make it through.
If we promise you something, that's what you're going to get, no matter what.
We're here when you need us to protect the safety and comfort of your family.
If you're not happy, we're going to make it right.
If we're willing to put 100% money-back guarantee on what we do, what type of work do you think we do?
Give us a call. We're there for you 24/7, 365 days a year.
Enough said.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Jet Radio. I'm Ted Char, your host, and Dr. Mark Roizen has joined us today. He is the Chief Wellness Officer for the Cleveland Clinic. Dr. Roizen, welcome back.
Good to be back. Thank you.
Hey, could you help us understand who are the biggest drivers of population health change, and perhaps give us some perspective on both the personal level and the community level?
I mean, right now, who is the biggest drivers? Well,
let me phrase that a little bit better. So we've got this complexity of behavior change, and there are varying levels of openness. So there are some individuals who are not open to behavior change in terms of their food choices, others that are somewhat open to it and could be influenced by various factors, and then those that are very much wanting to do everything that they can to promote their health, but we know something about the overall stats of our population health, and so it's helpful to know for those various categories who can drive change at those various levels.
Well, what has happened now is society has really driven change, but it's actually been with regulation. If you look at smoking, so we had a 50% men, 35% women smoking rate in I think it was 62 or 3, and we're now down to about 16. Someplace between 15 and 16% overall for the nation. Well, what caused that? It was tax changes, but it was also societal changes of saying smoking's a habit that causes you and everyone around you to get ill. It's the largest cause of disability. It's the largest cause of disability payments. It's the largest cause of premature death. And people who say, well, I'm smoking because I haven't saved for retirement, I got to die early, just fool themselves because they end up with 18 years of disability on average before death. So the point is that it is some regulations, and they aren't overly easy to get in. I mean, smoking has taken us 50 years. If we're that slow with food choices and portion size and changing, if we're that slow with the other toxins, BPA and BPS and the phthalates, and other things that get into our drinking water and stay in there for a long time, if we're that slow with managing stress and getting physical activity back in our life, we as a society will be spending much more on health care or rationing it severely, probably based on age and income levels, and that'll make society much worse. So this is really a key thing. So who has the levers right now? Well, it's corporations with the change in insurance costs, as the Cleveland Clinic has done, and as GE and IBM and a number of other Lafarge Wholesome have done, that give people extra incentive and behavior changes to do it. The federal government, through Medicare and Medicaid, have made, what you might call a 1 or 2% attempt at it. So there's just such small changes that they've done in the regulation. Soda taxes they're really a small thing, but they're symbolic, I guess, that sugar is bad for us. Is what we started the conversation with, but they're really such small changes, we aren't going to drive it that way as much as we would with the corporations having the leverage. So who's making the major changes? It is now corporations, and we aren't doing as well at population health by doing it with overall culture change and regulation, and this is good for income equality, and this is good for society as a whole, unfortunately. The best news of that from a competitive standpoint is we've exported our bad habits, and China and India are eating worse than we are and getting chronic diseases and type 2 diabetes and cancer rates at a higher rate. From a competitive standpoint, that's good news. From an overall world standpoint, we aren't doing as well as we should be.
Yeah. Let's see. So even those that are not that open to wellness do make some changes if they have the incentive. So, for instance, here in Des Moines, there's a company called Meredith, and they have literally a 97-98% participation rate in their workplace wellness program. And you have a much broader scope with your perspective. What would you say, does that extend further?
If they can survive, if they can sustain that degree of change in their wellness, or that degree of participation in there, and you see, participation is defined as, did I participate in one 5K, or did I participate in one walk, or am I doing it, am I getting my 10,000 steps 85% of the time? So it really depends on how you define that, but if you can sustain anything over 70% participation in getting 5 normals, you are really doing exceptionally well, and you will be lowering your total costs and your total illness burden, and that group, that society, that corporation, that area of the country, whatever does it, will be exceptional.
Yeah. So in some ways, so help us understand the momentum factor here. So say someone is in such a position where, hey, I'm not that into wellness, but I've participated in this program because of the cost savings. But then as time goes along, they're like, hey, I kind of like this. I feel better. I have more energy. How often does that sort of thing happen?
Well, that happens. That's a very common thing. So that one of the great things about the corporate wellness programs that people can sustain for a year through incentives is that once they sustain it for a year, they feel more energetic, they feel more alive, they get, if you will, they feel like they're younger. That's the real age concept. And by feeling younger, they actually are younger. That is, by having done these choices to be more physically active, to avoid more of the snake oil foods, and to adopt more of the foods they can have a relationship with, by learning how to manage stress, by avoiding smoking secondhand smoke, hookah parlors, and smoking joints. If they do all of those, they're incredibly much healthier and will feel much more energy and much more alive and have much more energy for purpose in life.
Yeah. So this gives us some hope that this wide-scale change can take place. And if you could share your expertise, am I making too much of a stretch? Well, I know this much, that when our diet changes, it actually does help non-human factors like land management. We know, for instance, that if the grain efficiencies for beef, you get 3 to 4 times more protein out of pork and poultry than the same amount of grain fed to a cow. And so that has implications to how well we manage our soil and our land. And that's basically what I was referring to in terms of when people get better, so does the environment. But could you share your perspective on that issue?
Yeah, you would be... the data are really good that you can prevent or reverse heart disease to going to a plant-based diet. And that involves obviously a lot of soy and corn, but it's going to a plant-based diet and going away from red meat totally. So, and the more you move towards fewer feet in your diet, the healthier your body will be. So going away from 4-legged to 2-legged is a major step in the right direction. I'm not saying this just because of the environmental and efficiency standpoint. I'm saying it just because of the health standpoint, but the point you're bringing up is there's a lot more efficiency in land use going to plant-based diets as well, with meat as a what you might call condiment or rare thing once a week, if you will.
Yeah.
Now, poultry, that is white meat poultry, and fish, at least salmon and ocean trout, seem to be incredibly healthy for a diet as well. But the diet that Bill Clinton went on that reversed his heart disease, that a number of others have gone on, Al Gore, why am I blanking on his name? The guy who does the Capital One commercials, I'm blanking on his name. But in any case, the diet that these people have gone on, said they've gone on, is a purely plant-based, very low-oil diet. Eating, as Dr. Esselstyn, who promotes it, says, it's eating nothing with a face or a mother. But those are healthy for your arteries. They give you much more energy. It's incredible how people say much less arthritis, much less of the dementia and other diseases that we're getting in type 2 diabetes, and they're good for the environment. Now, I don't know the diet that is common, but the plant-based, it seems to me, as we move more towards it, can be a real boon to American society and to the environment as well.
Yeah. So since we're speaking on the wider scale here, what policies can the government create in order to facilitate some of these positive changes in preventative health care?
Well, your senator, I think, your ex-Senator Harkin tried to do this by moving much more of farm subsidies towards plant-based foods. So that's, if you look at it, it is trying to teach kids and teach in school the value of a plant-based diet, the value from a economic standpoint for American society, and the hazard of our not doing so. We've increased type 2 diabetes in America from 2.2 million in 1974 to 29 million. That's a 14-fold increase with only a 50% increase in the population from 1974 to 2014. The prediction is by 2024, we will have 80 million type 2 diabetics, another 2.5-fold increase in that, or will be something like 35-fold increase without even a doubling of the population. That's what is causing income inequality. That's what is sapping the national budgets. That's what's sapping our ability to invest in infrastructure in the military and other social programs we care about. And it's only if we get control of that, and we can, by going more back closer to a plant-based diet and doing more physical activity and managing stress, if we do those things, we will thrive as a society. If we don't do them, we're going to be in real big doo-doo, because we will have more income inequality and we'll have rationing based on age and income levels that none of us want.
Yeah. Yeah, so since the government stands to save the most money from preventative health care, are they not in the best position to start incentivizing preventative health care?
Well, they are, but the Obama couldn't get it through enough of the prevention through Congress. Now we're in a unique position, again, where we have a one-party government, and there are tons of corrections needed to health care, both Medicare and Medicaid, as well as the Obamacare law, to push getting 5 normals. Only 0.6% of people age 60 and over in America have 5 normals. Less than 1%, 0.6%. If we got that to 70%, I mean, you would save $600 billion a year on our federal budget. I mean, the amount of money we could then spend on infrastructure and defense and all those things we care about is so much greater, and we wouldn't have to spend it on the increased spending we will have to have, and we will have to have an increased spending on medical costs if we don't do it.
Yeah, who can influence the formation of some of those policies that would promote preventive health care?
Well, this is getting political, but it is the senators and representatives and the president and the healthcare advisors. I think that the Trump administration, if you look at Trump in general for his medical advisors, there's not a very deep bench, or there hasn't been. But if there were, or if he brought in a deep bench and we could change this, that's where you'll get the changes. And so it's still needed now, but it's very available. Meaning, there is a deep enough bench if he wants to use it, and because we're essentially you've got a one-party system, they could put into regulation and law enough incentives for preventing tobacco use, for preventing physical inactivity, for encouraging what we call love you foods that you can establish a relationship with, and for preventing other toxins, that you really could change the economy of the United States for the better.
Yeah. So grassroots movements, bottom up, has made changes in policy with the environment, with civil rights. Do you think it can happen again from a grassroots level for preventive health care?
Well, I don't know if it doesn't. We're in big trouble. I hope it can. You would know that better than I do. You have a radio show that reaches thousands of people. So, is it possible?
I think so, but I think it's a team effort. So it seems to me that there's a large number of people that will be impacted, like you mentioned, with workplace wellness, and others that will be impacted by the food environment, like Blue Zone's efforts. So it's kind of a combination of various factors. So
I think you're absolutely right.
Yep. Hey, I am so glad that you've joined us today to share your perspective on this. I think these figures will help people to put things in perspective and perhaps take more action themselves. And I wish you well in your role as the Chief Wellness Officer. And I hope that you can continue to in a sense, franchise this across the country and in the world. I know at the innovation meeting, they talked about the new centers that the Cleveland Clinic is establishing, not only here, but elsewhere. And I wish you well in continuing to be a leader for those efforts. And come back and join us again, if at all possible.
I'd be glad to, and thank you for making Jet Radio so forward-looking that we're actually may have a chance of a ground movement.
Yeah, our pleasure. So again, thank you for joining us today. We've had Dr. Mark Roizen with us. He is the Chief Wellness Officer for the Cleveland Clinic. And join us again on Jet Radio for our next sustainability topic.